Okay, let's stop blaming your thyroid. Okay, let's work on that. Let's talk about that today. Man, if I had a dollar for every time somebody came up to me and talked about my doctor said my thyroid is, the reason I'm losing weight or can't lose weight, rather, I have no energy. This is the reason why I just feel like crap all the time. If we had a dollar for every time I heard that over my career, we'd be able to solve world hunger by now. Okay, it's blamed for so many things. And is it important? Absolutely. And can it be a problem? Of course it can. But I believe it just gets an unfair, helping or portion of dysfunction in the human body. All right. I'm Dr. Jason McCammon, board certified licensed naturopathic doctor. I'm a root cause triangulation specialist to help really figure out, how we arrive at these health challenges from the root end of it instead of just treating symptoms. So let's talk about it. Let's first introduce what we're going to be going into, about 3 parts today. We're going to do some myth busting first. Okay, start off with that. We're going to remove obstacles, talk about how to get things out of our way to have better thyroid function and health, and talk about the really truth behind what's going on with dysfunction, and then how do we support the thyroid and again other body systems that are going to be super important as we talk about this discussion. Okay, so let's first get into myth busting. First, before I even lay that out, I want to talk about Graves, Hashimotos, and cancers. Okay, those are some obviously very serious conditions. I personally am a Hashimoto's survivor, so I know what it's like to have major thyroid dysfunction. It's pretty bad. So again, I want to brush aside that there is legit thyroid illness. Absolutely, there is. Graves and Hashis, for example, are autoimmune conditions, which yes affect the thyroid, but remember, autoimmunity has a huge cornucopia of things that are involved in it. So that's will be a whole nother video that I'll do, hopefully in the near future, talk about autoimmunity. But for now, understand that you can still benefit from this information even with those conditions. Cancer, same idea. Cancer is a really holistic phenomenon. It comes from so many breakdowns in our body, in our immune system, and etc., that there's a lot we can discuss there. But again, if you've been through that, more power to you. God bless you. But you can still benefit from this even with those conditions. So without further ado, let's talk about it. So some myths here. The low thyroid is genetic. Well, usually when conventional medicine doesn't have a lot of answers or reasons for things, it's going to say, it's probably because mom and dad had low thyroid. Let's check your genetics. Oh, sure enough, they had that low thyroid. Actually, research shows it's less than 0.2% of chronic illness is genetic. So very little chance of that. Is it possible? Sure. But let's not keep blaming genetics. Even if it were a genetic issue, there's still things you can do about it. Low thyroid is the only cause of fatigue exhaustion. Completely false right there. It is a cause, yes, but we have adrenals. In fact, I think that's more superior as far as underdiagnosis out there. We have your gut microbiome and all the gut issues, food intolerance. And of course, if you're malnourished and you have no energy, or rather no fuel and no minerals coming in the body, how can you have energy and feel like you have a metabolism? So it's not the only cause there. And then a lot of times people will just get a TSH from a doc will order a TSH there, also known as thyroid stimulating hormone from the pituitary gland. And that's pretty much all I see. I ask for labs from clients if they had a provider they work with, and they'll bring me the report with the TSH. You're like, see, it's high. I knew I had hypothyroidism. I'm like, okay, there's a lot more to the thyroid and all the connections it makes than just TSH. So especially now if you're on medication, which we'll talk about in a minute, but if you're medicated and the TSH gets in within a certain range that the doctor likes, and you still are having low energy and weight gain. How many of you have dealt with that? Hello, right? A lot of us have dealt with that. And the doc's like, the numbers look good. I don't know what your issue is. And wait, I still don't feel good, doc. I'm still dragging, still got fatigue, hair loss, things like that. Well, again, there's a lot more to it than just TSH, okay? And again, I mentioned earlier, if you're on a T4 or a thyroxine replacement or a drug like a Synthroid or levothyroxine, that's going to bring that number down. I'm no longer in the hypothyroid, and it should be good to go. Well, again, how many of us, right, have dealt with that situation where they say, well, we've treated your hypothyroidism, and then it's kind of like a shrug from there. Like, okay, you should be good to go. The labs look good. I don't know what your problem is. And again, I think these docs mean well, these clinicians, these healthcare providers, but unfortunately don't have enough training or tools in holistic medicine or looking outside the typical boxes that they have to check. That's a problem. So there's a lot more to it than just getting on your T4 drug. In fact, in the majority of cases when I've worked with clients that are on that medication, they really aren't getting any better, and sometimes it gets worse. What you're actually doing is shutting down your own gland. Your thyroid will shut down since it's going to get negative feedback from a hypothalamus, and therefore the pituitary saying we have enough of that running around. This is what's called exogenous hormone that we don't need to make anymore. So you're going to get a shutdown effect, and if someday you come off that, it's going to take a while for that gland to come back on. So it's really not a cute little fix. Are there times when that medication is really a great resource? Certainly, if you have an ablation, remove thyroid, things of that nature. Another myth there, that you only use blood values to dial in your thyroid function. There's a lot of other ways to measure hormones in your body, guys, including salivary, including urine, and again, many more functional testing that's going to look at the conversion of these hormones, which I'll talk to later. But we've got to look at more than just blood values. And also, another big myth there is just let's say you go to a doctor's appointment and they just send you down the hall to the lab at a random time of day. Did you know, in published studies, one I can reference, the Natural Medicine Journal, it's a peer-reviewed journal, okay, with published studies there that are really great, a lot of functional information in there, but they found time of day makes a huge difference. They found going in the morning is really actually essential. So definitely if you get lab values, go in the morning, or if you get salivary values, which I order a lot, go in the morning. Afternoon, your thyroid production actually goes down on purpose because we need a little less energy throughout the day. So it's going to look like a little bit more normalized levels later in the day. So that does matter. And then if there's another myth, if you're completely doomed if you have no thyroid ablated, maybe you've had a radiation treatment there and your thyroid's been really impacted by that, or just low functioning thyroid, that you're doomed and it's over, that gland is dead. Part of it could be dead, it could be damaged or again missing. There are still ways we can work with your body to improve thyroid conversion and solve a lot of these issues. Okay, so you're not doomed at all. So I have a story for you from a client that was somebody recently had come in a few months ago suffering with Hashimotos thyroiditis, something that I've dealt with and put in remission, which it's tricky, but it can be done. Just for those of you out there that are dealing with that, I know it's difficult. I'm here for you. We were able to dramatically improve her health. Of course, it took more than just messing with the thyroid or working on the thyroid, but there's a lot we could do, and her numbers did come down, but that really wasn't what showed us that things were working. It was how she felt. So when you're working with somebody with especially an autoimmune condition, the thyroid levels are going to fluctuate wildly. Okay, one day you get a draw and they look great, but the patient's not feeling good. Another day they may look terrible and they're feeling better. And unfortunately, a lot of you are advanced clinicians as far as endocrinology, like endocrinologists and those with more training, and even in a lot of family docs, they will just go by lab values. And again, I tried to mention that earlier, that we can't just go by lab values, because we have an autoimmune condition, we have antibodies that are eating our thyroid tissue, and when they consume it, and then that's metabolized, it may look like we have good energy levels in the body as far as thyroid, but we don't. And so you can't just go by lab values. You got to go by symptoms, how the patient's feeling, and there's a lot more gray area there that we have to dial in. Okay, so we improved this tremendously with her because we addressed the underlying causes of her autoimmune condition, which really had nothing to do with the thyroid, by the way, which is the case in most autoimmune conditions. Has to do with gut, has to do with deficiencies, food sensitivities. Stress was a big one, not sleeping well. She was a shift worker, so we had to really talk about strategies to improve her deep sleep, things like that. But yeah, she was able to stop her reliance on medication, able to actually reduce her body weight, get normal energy levels. It was incredible, this transition. I was so proud of her. It was awesome. Okay, let's move into the next section there, which would be removing the obstacles to healing. Okay, and this is going to help a lot of parts of your body. But let's talk about endocrine disruptors. There are over 250,000 persistent man-made chemicals in our environment. Obviously, some areas of the world or our country more than others will be concentrated. However, we live in that sea every day. We breathe it, drink it. It's a part of our food system, unfortunately. It's a sad fact, but that's actually a published statistic now. So we have to realize there's a lot of these chemicals around us, a lot of them we can't control. So what can you control? Deodorants that you put on, especially women with the lymph nodes near the breast there. Be really careful with that. So let's get away from the aluminum. A big one is phthalates and all those chemicals that they put into like air fresheners, things that help smells go throughout your house. By the way, I know they smell really good. By the way, those are chemicals that make that smell. Remember, keep that in mind. They smell amazing, but those are very toxic over a long period of time of exposure. So we've got to work on getting rid of these endocrine disruptors, other man-made chemicals, food additives, dyes in your clothing. Another big one is going to be your chemicals they put in your detergents. Let's try to get away from as many of those as you possibly can to give your body and your glands a fighting chance. Okay, these disrupt our endocrine system, which, what does that mean? It's going to screw with the signal coming out of the gland, or affect the ability for the gland to make the right hormone signal, and then for that signal to then bind to the receptor site at the cellular level. We've got to have that binding, and if it's blocked by other things in your environment, it can't hear that hormone, therefore it can't do its job, and therefore in many cases the thyroid hormone is ineffective. Okay, circadian rhythm and sleep, of course, is huge. You've got to do a routine. You've got to get in a routine. Our body thrives on routine. Okay, we've got to try to go to bed and create a sleep routine about the same time every night, winding down, getting away from the going to analog entertainment, away from the screens, things like that. You got to get in a rhythm for your endocrine system to start say, oh, you know what, I should be secreting this hormone at this time. Let me get in that pathway. Okay, really important. A big one is, and this we could talk a lot about it, but I'll briefly mention, it's so important to discuss the conversion of T4 to T3. So even again, back in that medication we talked about, or even your normal endogenous production of this hormone, if you're making enough, you've got to be able to convert T4, which is largely inactive in our body, to T3. T3 is the active thyroid hormone that actually tells the cell, hey, speed up. We need to burn energy here. We need to keep our body temperature up, things like that, to a normal temperature. So really important that we talk about conversion. I'll talk about some nutrients a little bit later that can help with that conversion, but that's essential. That's often missed in your lab values by a typical conventional provider. Let's talk about reverse T3. Reverse T3 is your body basically putting the brakes on your metabolism. It's taking T3, what it can convert, which may not be much, again, and then it's converting what little you have left there for burning fuel in your body, creating metabolism. It may be converting that to reverse T3. Reverse T3 does the opposite of T3, which is, again, put the brakes on the system. Reverse T3 says, you know what, we don't want to expend energy, and there's many reasons for that. One of them is stress, okay? There's also, again, nutrient deficiency, so we've got to look at that. And then we got to look at a high nutrient diet. We've got to add the raw materials to the diet that your body needs in general, but especially the thyroid, to actually make hormones, okay? If your body's in a constant state of miscommunication from endocrine disruptors, or not getting sleep, or not getting good conversion, or malnourished, you're just not going to have a good glandular system regardless of what provider you work with. You've got to work on that. Let's talk about supporting the thyroid briefly. Nascent iodine, that's a type of iodine that's actually charged. It's more effective in the body. You got to watch that though. You can't OD on it like with anything. I would suggest roughly around the 100 microgram level or so. And again, if you have a high C vegetable diet, you may not need any. But again, we want to look at possible iodine supplementation if you're going to be low. I wouldn't go much over 200 micrograms. However, there are studies, especially out of Turkey, that showed when they did a countrywide, pandemic level of giving iodine as supplementation, they actually induced thyroiditis, Hashimotos, to a large chunk of the population because they overdid it with iodine. So you got to be careful with that. Selenium, it's been a little bit more of a recent nutrient that's been talked a lot about because of COVID and its immune support. That's big for thyroid production. Vitamin D3, just unbelievable powerhouse. It does so much. It's actually a steroidal type structure. It's not really a vitamin, but we'll call it that. Really important to get your D3 levels, not just take it, but let's get your levels checked. Ideal levels, the research shows, are between 50 and 100 in your blood levels, okay? A lot of labs top out at 80. And so a lot of clinicians, once you get toward the top of that range, are going to say, oh, wait a minute, toxic, let's get it. No, not at all true. The lowest level of toxicity that I've ever found in studies is 200 of the blood levels. So between 50 and 80 on that vitamin D3. Most people, adults, will require 5,000 to 10,000 IU per day to get to that level. It's really important to get your D checked. The often recommended 1,000 IU, 2,000 IU a day is just not enough. Zinc is a big one as well. Got to watch zinc again. It's been back in the media and very popular based on its antiviral properties. It's very powerful, but let's be careful with our zinc and looking at the 15 to 20 milligrams of zinc. We don't need mega doses like 50. That's kind of overdoing it there. Glandulars, a whole nother topic, but glandulars are basically freeze-dried extracts or and basically extracted actual glandular tissues from typically a pig. It can be from a cow, bovine, or porcine, and these can help support our glands. They're not a huge amount of tissue, so don't be too worried about it, but they can really help support the actual gland and get it to rebuild and recover because it has some of those building blocks and nutrients it needs. That can be big. And then glucosterone, one thing to keep in mind, it's actually part of the boswellia plant. It's kind of an extract from that used in Ayurveda medicine. Ayurveda has some incredible, rich scientific history as a healthcare system. It's pretty amazing. But glucosterone has been shown to help support thyroid function. So something thinking about there, maybe at the 25 milligram level or so. Okay. So really looking at the thyroid from a holistic standpoint, looking at the myths out there, look at ways to remove obstacles from your gland and signaling, and looking at supporting it, I feel is a far better approach as far as looking at this topic as a whole versus just blaming the thyroid for its failure, and looking at just taking a medication to solve the problem. Let's look at it holistically and see what we get from there, okay? I'd like to call your attention to my free ebook at my website, drjasonnd.com. ND is a naturopathic doctor, called Vibrant Health Breakthrough. Great ebook there. I'd like you to go to my website, sign up for that. Chock full of direct, straight content you can apply to your life and start feeling better, because that's my whole goal here, is just to help you feel better, okay? Until next time, you take care and be well. Bye-bye.